Hello again. I'm Dr. Nunez with Living Health. Today I wanted to talk to you about certain foods that for some people might give them some stomach upset, that they feel bloated, that they feel like the food just sits in their guts, and sometimes it's due to things like irritable bowel syndrome or other conditions. So you should always be consulting your healthcare provider about these things. But I did want to give you some clues perhaps that are out there as to what might be causing stomach upsets. Now, there's a lot of talk out there about gluten and things like this, but it's not just those kinds of things. And I wanted to get into that. If you like these kinds of videos, press the subscribe button, press the like button, press the little bell so you can be notified of future videos. It does help. And always leave a comment. It helps us with new topics for videos in the future. So the specific area here that I wanted to talk about is something called FODMAP, okay? And what does FODMAP stand for? FODMAP is something that was, a lot of this research came out of Australia, and it was found that there are certain food groups that people specifically with irritable bowel syndrome have difficulty with, and this might be more generally applicable to other folks. So FODMAP, F-O-D-M-A-P. It's fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. Now, what does this mean and how does this break down? I'm going to give you some links down below in the description from Johns Hopkins, from Cleveland Clinic, from Monash University in Australia, that goes into this in more detail, just to educate yourself on these kinds of foods that fall into these groups. Now, these are typically sugars, sugar compounds, complexes, simple carbohydrates that are in foods, in certain kinds of foods in higher amounts. And that might trigger for some people a little difficulty in digesting them. These things might end up in the gut. They might then ferment in the gut, produce gas and that sensation of heaviness and bloatedness and stomach upset. Now, one of the most common things, if you look at this as we get older, is that people have difficulty digesting dairy products, which is the lactose specifically in milk. And lactose is under the D in FODMAP. It's one of these disaccharides. It's a milk sugar. And that's something that's typically common as we get older. We have a less of ability to digest that because the amount of lactase enzyme that digests the lactose, that breaks that down, reduces in our gut. So that's something to look at in some cases. And again, you do want to consult your healthcare provider. And if you're going to really start to get into something much more elaborate of trying to reduce all of these things specifically and then add them back in a structured program, you may need the help of a nutritionist or a specialist in gastroenterology or those kinds of things. But having some knowledge about which foods have these sugar compounds, these simple carbohydrates, might help you, might give you some clue after you've had a certain kind of meal and you feel a certain heaviness or bloatedness or stomach upset, that you could look back and think to yourself, well, maybe it was one of these things, and you'll have some guidance, some structure at least with which to think about it. So what are some of these foods? And I'm going to give you here a little image from the Cleveland Clinic that talks about these things. Garlic, onions are some of these foods that have asparagus, cauliflower may have an issue. On the other hand, what might have lower FODMAP might be things like eggplant, green beans, bok choy, bell peppers, carrots, those kinds of things. And you see them in the list that I'm putting up. Fruits, some of the fruits, apples, plums, cherries may be high in some of these FODMAP substances. Other fruits like cantaloupe, grapes, kiwi, mandarins, oranges, those kinds of things, pineapple, strawberries are lower in these FODMAPs. So you really have to sort of drill down on some of these to get the right impression of what might be triggering things. And I do want to caution you too, it doesn't mean if you do have a stomach upset with a particular kind of food that you have to get rid of it completely. Most of these FODMAP areas, it's just the amount too. So if you have a small amount of something, it doesn't upset your stomach. But if you take too much of it, you eat too much of it, it may give you that sensation of bloatedness and intestinal discomfort. So it's also a component of dose dependent. And that's what I mean about you're trying to think through these things and see what areas. Now, one of the particular areas that I do want to drill down on a little bit is this issue that people are talking about gluten and wheat, and they're avoiding wheat products because of the gluten. Now, gluten is not on these lists. Gluten is actually a protein. But what is from wheat are oligosaccharides, which are the O in FODMAP. And there are many people, yes, that if they eat too much of something that has wheat, it may not be the gluten that they're sensitive to. It may be that they are overwhelming their body's ability to digest all the oligosaccharides, which are the sugar compounds, the simple carbohydrate compounds that are found in wheat products. So whereas, and I give the example many times, whereas you might be okay eating a slice of toast, you might feel very bloated or with a stomach upset if you eat half a loaf of bread or half a pizza. Well, pizza becomes a little more complicated sometimes because you have not just the starch and the oligosaccharides from the wheat, but if you have cheese on it, you'll have the dairy too on top of that, which has the lactose. So you're hitting two areas within the FODMAP. And on top of that, pizza may have garlic, where they might have onions in it, and those things are part of these FODMAPs. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to avoid all these things again. It just means it may be dose dependent. It may be that you're okay with one slice of pizza, but if you have 3 slices, it's too much. I just wanted to put this out there for you all so you have a way of thinking about this. And again, there's another thing that I wanted to talk to you about too, that the Monash folks in Australia are into. As I've spoken before, it's important to get enough fiber in your diet. And I have another video about that. And when you're looking at FODMAP and you're trying to address some of these issues, sometimes you find that it's hard to get enough fiber if you're limiting some of these foods. But the Monash folks in their blog, and I'll give you the link below, and I'll put some of this up here for you too, give you guidelines on how you can still maintain fiber by eating still low in FODMAP. It doesn't mean that you eliminate the FODMAP completely, but it shows you how you can get lower amounts of FODMAP while still preserving some of the fiber. Again, these are just guidelines for you, little information here that you could look at and keep in the back of your mind when you're looking at issues of stomach upset or I don't feel good when I'm eating certain things. This gives you a little guidance, a little framework of ways to think about it. Principally, I will say, most commonly as you get older, it's the lactose, the dairy, and milk. And yes, if you're eating things that are very wheat-based or in that carb category, you'll notice that maybe you're having an issue with oligosaccharides. It may not be the gluten. It may be the carbs and the wheat-based nutrients. And it's not just wheat, by the way. Some people get rid of gluten and they replace it with rye, but rye also has these oligosaccharides. So it may give you a little way of just keeping yourself informed and thinking about it. Also, we notice as people get older, sometimes they tolerate less garlic, and garlic is one of these higher FODMAP foods. So it may not be that you have an allergy or to garlic or anything like that, but it may just be that as you get older, you eat less of it or you tolerate less of it, because the more of it you eat, you get more of a stomach upset, or you burp it up more, you get more gassy release from that kind of thing. So if you like these kinds of videos, press that thumbs up, press the subscribe button, press that little bell, leave us a comment. Again, always consult your healthcare provider. I just wanted to put that out there. There's a lot of information out there about FODMAP, and I'm putting the links below for you. It just gives you a little bit of a framework. I do want to say there are a lot of these diets out there that people put out that are in the popular media. And if you look at these lists from FODMAP or other kinds of program like this that are really more evidence-based, you see how somebody can tailor a diet by getting you to exclude some of these things that are on here. So you have to take everything with a grain of salt when you're looking at just popular diets or things that certain folks might be doing out there. And it may be that if you drill down on some of these things like FODMAP that have more evidence behind them, you see the roots of where these diets were created and manufactured from. So again, until next time, I'm Dr. Nunez with Living Health. Bye-bye.